There are moments when everything feels too heavy. The to-do list, the responsibilities, the expectations. It's like the mind starts racing and the body forgets how to rest. In these moments, anxiety doesn't always come as a scream. Sometimes it arrives as silence, a tight chest, a restless night, a feeling that something is off even when nothing looks wrong. Louise Hay taught that every emotion we experience is a messenger. Anxiety, in her view, isn't our enemy. It's a signal that somewhere, somehow, we stopped feeling safe in ourselves. It's a whisper from the body saying, "Please come back to me. Please come home." The first step toward dissolving anxiety is not to fight it. It's to listen, and that can feel unfamiliar. We're so used to trying to fix, control, or numb what we feel that the idea of simply sitting with it may seem pointless. But according to Louise Hay, healing begins when we stop resisting and start acknowledging. Think about the last time you felt anxious. Maybe it was about a conversation, or something left undone, or a future that feels uncertain. Instead of trying to think your way out, try this. Pause. Place your hand on your heart. Breathe deeply and say, "I am safe. I trust the process of life." These simple words can sound small, but repeated with intention, they are powerful. Louise used to say, "The thoughts we choose to think are the tools we use to paint the canvas of our lives." If our inner dialogue is filled with fear, the world will reflect fear. But when we choose loving thoughts, everything begins to shift. Now consider this. What if your anxiety isn't here to destroy you, but to guide you? What if it's the soul's way of reminding you to slow down, to realign, to soften? What if healing doesn't mean changing everything about your life, but learning how to respond differently to what's already here? I invite you to sit with that thought for a moment. And if any part of this speaks to you, I'd love to hear it. What does your anxiety usually try to tell you? Feel free to share your reflection in the comments. Sometimes, putting our feelings into words is the first step toward release. This journey is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you already are beneath the layers of fear. Louise often reminded us that self-love is the greatest healer. When you begin treating yourself with gentleness and respect, something inside starts to calm down. So today, just for a moment, don't try to fix anything. Just breathe. Speak to yourself with kindness. Choose a single thought that feels soft and let it repeat like a gentle melody in your mind. That is how transformation begins. Not with force, but with presence. One of the greatest misunderstandings about anxiety is believing it means something is wrong with us. But Louise Hay would gently remind us that nothing about us is broken. What causes suffering is not the feeling itself, but the judgment we place on it. When anxiety appears, many women begin to feel ashamed, as if they are weak, too sensitive, or not in control. And this judgment only deepens the wound. Imagine for a moment that anxiety is like a child tugging at your sleeve. It doesn't need punishment, it needs attention. A mature response to this emotion doesn't come from suppression, but from awareness. When we begin to notice the patterns, the thoughts, the reactions, we stop feeling so powerless. We begin to reconnect with our inner strength. Louise often said that our thoughts are not facts, they are choices. Many women go through their days believing thoughts that were never truly theirs. Words heard in childhood, messages from society, echoes of past disappointments. These thoughts are like old recordings playing on loop, and when left unchecked, they become the silent architects of our anxiety. Now think about how often you say yes when you mean no. How often you smile when something inside you aches. These tiny betrayals add up. They may seem harmless at the time, but each one tells your nervous system that your needs don't matter. Over time, the body starts to speak louder, through restlessness, through tightness, through exhaustion. To change this, the first step is not to push harder. is to pause and ask, what am I really feeling right now? That question alone can shift your entire state. Louise encouraged people to treat emotions like visitors. You welcome them, listen, and learn. Then you decide what stays and what gently moves on. There's a woman I once heard about who always carried a small notebook. Whenever she felt anxious, she would pause and write, even just one sentence. Sometimes it was something like, I'm scared and I don't know why. Other times, it was, I feel disconnected from myself. The words didn't need to be perfect. They just needed to be honest. And through this small act, she began to meet herself again. Anxiety doesn't need to be eliminated. It needs to be understood. It's often a sign that part of us feels unsafe or unseen. When we begin to respond to it with care instead of fear, we send a powerful message to ourselves. A message that says, I am here, I am listening. And sometimes, that's all we need to feel just a little more grounded. Louise believed in the healing power of presence. She taught that the way we speak to ourselves in moments of pain is what shapes our healing, not the size of the problem, not the speed of the solution, but the quality of our inner voice. A soft, loving voice can calm even the most restless parts of us. There's a quiet kind of pain that many women carry for years without naming. It's not always loud or visible. It doesn't always show up in tears. Sometimes it shows up as perfectionism, as overachievement, as being the one who never asks for help. On the outside, everything seems fine. But inside, there's a constant tension, like the body is bracing for something that never fully arrives. Louise Hay believed that much of our anxiety stems from unexpressed emotions, especially those we were taught to suppress. As young girls, many women were rewarded for being nice, quiet, agreeable. Anger was seen as rude. Sadness was inconvenient. Needs were labeled as selfish, so they learned to hide, to swallow pain with a smile, to keep going, even when something inside was begging them to slow down. But those emotions don't disappear. They stay, stored in the body, in the egg muscles, in the breath. Over time, they become tension, fatigue, chronic worry. Anxiety becomes the language of what was never allowed to be said. Louise often said, "The body listens to the words we do not speak." And she was right. Think of the moments when you pushed yourself through exhaustion, when you said yes out of fear of disappointing someone, when you smiled to avoid conflict. Each time, you told your inner self that survival mattered more than truth, that peace with others was more important than peace within. To begin changing this pattern, you don't need to confront everyone who ever hurt you. You don't need to explain your pain to those who never listened. You only need to start listening to yourself. That's where healing begins, in the simple act of presence. In the courage to feel what you feel without shame. Louise taught that every cell in our body responds to the thoughts we think and the emotions we carry. She invited us to create new habits, new words, new energy patterns, not as a performance, but as a return to the self we were before fear taught us to hide. A woman once shared how she began a practice of looking into her eyes, in the mirror each morning, not to criticize, but to connect. At first, it felt strange, but over time, it became sacred. She would say, "I love you, I accept you, I am here for you." Slowly, her anxiety softened, not because her life was easier, but because her inner voice became kinder. That's the power of self-love. It doesn't erase life's challenges, but it changes how we face them. When the inner world becomes safe, the outer world becomes less threatening. You don't have to fix everything today. You only have to stop abandoning yourself. So the next time you feel anxiety rising, pause. Ask gently, what needs my attention right now? Not what needs to be solved, Just what needs to be seen? That question alone can bring your heart a little closer to peace. There's a powerful truth that often goes unnoticed in the rush of everyday life. The thoughts you think when no one is watching shape the way you feel in every moment. Louise Hay taught that we are not helpless in the face of anxiety. We are, in fact, powerful co-creators of our inner experience. But many of us forget this power, especially when anxiety clouds our vision and steals our breath. You may notice that anxiety loves repetition. It thrives on routine thoughts of fear, what-ifs, and imagined worst-case scenarios. It whispers the same stories over and over again until they feel like reality. But what Louise showed the world is that repetition can also be used for healing. A new thought, spoken with love and consistency, has the power to interrupt the spiral, to break the pattern, to open a door where there was only a wall before. Try this. The next time you feel that familiar tension building in your chest, take a slow breath. Place your feet flat on the ground. Say to yourself, I choose peace in this moment, not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect, but now. This moment is your point of power. This moment is where transformation begins. Louise believed deeply in the practice of affirmations, not as magic words, but as medicine for the mind. When repeated with sincerity, they rewire the nervous system. They soften the fight or flight response. They remind the body that it's okay to relax. And from that relaxation, clarity returns, creativity returns. Life begins to flow again. I once heard about a woman who started whispering affirmations while washing dishes. Each time she held a plate, she would say, I am supported. Each time she dried a glass, she would say, I trust life. These were small moments, often overlooked, but over time, they rewrote her reality. She no longer moved through her day bracing for disaster. She began expecting peace, and her body responded. Now I'd love to ask you something. Is there a phrase you say to yourself when you feel anxious? Or perhaps a phrase you'd like to start using from today? If something comes to mind, feel free to share it in the comments. You never know who else might need to hear those exact words. You don't need a perfect life to feel better. You need a consistent commitment to meet yourself with kindness, even if it's just for a minute a day. Louise reminded us that every thought we think is creating our future. And when we begin choosing thoughts that feel gentle, supportive, and safe, the future begins to reflect that same energy back to us. So let today be the beginning of that practice. One loving thought at a time, one breath at a time. Even in the middle of a storm, you can become your own calm. And when you do, anxiety begins to lose its grip. There's something deeply healing about slowing down. In a world that moves so quickly, slowing down can feel like rebellion. But Louise Hay believed that stillness is not laziness. It's listening. It's choosing to be present with yourself instead of chasing everything outside of you. And when it comes to anxiety, stillness can reveal the truth behind the noise. Sometimes we rush through life thinking that if we just do more, fix more, or achieve more, the anxious feeling will finally go away. But anxiety isn't always about what's happening around us. It's often about what we've ignored within us. The moments we skipped meals to meet a deadline, the times we stayed silent to avoid tension, the days we kept smiling even when we felt like breaking. Louise taught that every time we abandon ourselves for the sake of being liked or accepted, we lose a bit of our center. Over time, we become disconnected from our own rhythm. That disconnection feels like anxiety, like something is off, but we don't know what or why. So what can we do when the world feels too loud and the pressure becomes too much? We return, not to who we think we should be, but to who we really are. And that return doesn't happen in a grand moment. It happens in small choices. The choice to rest when your body is tired. The choice to say no without guilt. The choice to do something that brings joy. even if no one else understands it. There's a story of a woman who started waking up 10 minutes earlier just to sit in silence with her coffee. No phone, no news, just her breath and the morning light. At first, it felt unproductive, but soon, those 10 minutes became sacred. She stopped waking up anxious. She started her days grounded, not rushed. And from that calm beginning, her whole energy shifted. You don't need a full hour of meditation or a weekend retreat to reconnect with yourself. You just need moments, pockets of peace. And in those pockets, you remind your nervous system that safety is here, that there's no need to fight or run, that you are allowed to rest. Louise Hay often said, "I am in the right place, at the right time, doing the right thing." This simple affirmation is powerful because it invites trust, not in perfection, but in presence. It allows you to stop questioning every step and start feeling grounded where you are. When you live in alignment with your own needs and values, anxiety begins to fade because your life starts to feel like your own again. You're no longer trying to live up to someone else's version of success. You're simply living with honesty, and that kind of life brings peace not only to your mind, but to your entire being. Some of the most anxious moments in a woman's life don't come from what's happening, but from what she believes could happen. Louise Hay often spoke about the power of our beliefs, especially the unconscious ones. These hidden thoughts shape how we respond to everything, and when we don't bring them into the light, they quietly control our lives. Think about how many times you've told yourself, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never get this right." Maybe you don't even say it out loud, but it's there. In the way you hesitate before speaking, in the way you over-prepare, in the way you second-guess your decisions, even the small ones. Louise taught that our inner critic is not our true voice. It's a collection of other voices we picked up along the way. Parents who meant well but expected too much. Teachers who only praised perfection. Society constantly telling us we need to be more, do more, look better, act quieter. Over time, those voices settle in. And when anxiety rises, they get louder. But here's the truth. You are not those voices. You never were. At your core, there is a place that knows peace, a place that remembers your worth without needing proof. And every time you pause, breathe, and speak kindly to yourself, you move closer to that place. I once heard about a woman who would place sticky notes on her bathroom mirror with simple phrases like, "I am enough, I am allowed to rest, I trust myself." At first, they felt silly. She said the words didn't match how she felt, but over time, they began to sink in. She started to believe them, not because her life changed overnight, but because she changed the story she told herself. That's what Louise Hay offered the world, a chance to rewrite our inner stories, to stop defining ourselves by the pain we've experienced and begin seeing ourselves as whole, capable, and deeply loved. When a woman does that, everything changes. Her energy softens. Her decisions come from clarity, not fear. And her anxiety loses its grip. Anxiety often comes from living in a future we can't control. But healing comes from returning to the present and choosing thoughts that support us instead of hurt us. You don't have to force yourself to believe a thought you're not ready for, but you can choose one that feels a little softer than the last, one step at a time. Louise reminded us that our minds are like gardens. If we want peace to grow, we must stop watering fear. We must choose which thoughts to feed, and in doing so, we reclaim our power. So if today you catch yourself thinking something harsh, pause. Ask, would I say this to a child I love? If the answer is no, then you deserve better too. You deserve a voice inside you that heals instead of harms. There comes a time when a woman realizes that peace isn't found in control. It's found in surrender. Louise Hay often said that what we resist persists. And anxiety, when met with resistance, often grows louder. But when met with compassion and curiosity, it begins to soften. It begins to dissolve. Most of us were taught to manage, fix, solve. We learn to chase outcomes, organize emotions, and keep everything under control. But anxiety isn't a problem to fix. It's a signal. It's a message from within that says something needs your care. Something needs your presence. Louise encouraged us to listen to our inner guidance. She called it inner wisdom and believed we all have it. It's the quiet knowing that rises when we silence the chaos and when we start to follow that guidance. Life stops feeling like a battlefield and begins to feel like a path. Think of the moments when you followed your intuition. Maybe you turned down an opportunity because it didn't feel right, even when others said it was perfect. Maybe you left a conversation that drained you or chose stillness over productivity. In those moments, you weren't being lazy. You were being wise. You were honoring your energy. This is a kind of maturity that cannot be rushed. It often comes after burnout, heartbreak, or deep disappointment. When the old ways of coping stop working, something new must be born, and that something often begins in silence, in still mornings, in unplanned pauses, in the courage to do less and feel more. A woman once shared that she began lighting a candle every evening before bed, not for any reason other than to mark the end of the day. She said it helped her separate the stress of the outside world from her inner world. That small act became sacred. It was her reminder to return to herself. A moment to say, I've done enough. I am enough. I can rest now. These rituals, however small, are acts of love. They teach the body it is safe. They signal the nervous system that the fight is over. And through that safety, the mind begins to quiet. The heart begins to open. The anxiety begins to release. Louise believed that self-care was not selfish. It was survival. It was how we build a foundation strong enough to hold peace. She invited us to stop abandoning ourselves in the name of responsibility, to stop betraying our needs to meet expectations. Because when we do that, we begin to lose ourselves. And when we lose ourselves, anxiety finds a way in. So let this be your reminder. You don't need permission to rest. You don't need to earn peace. You simply need to create space for it. One breath, one choice, one moment at a time. In that space, your true self returns, and with her, calm follows. And when calm returns, you begin to feel like yourself again. There is a quiet kind of freedom that comes when a woman remembers who she really is. Not the version shaped by pressure or fear, but the one who was always there underneath. Louise Hay often spoke about returning to the self, not becoming someone new, but peeling back the layers that never belonged to begin with. Anxiety loses power when we stop believing it defines us. When we begin to see it as a visitor, not a permanent part of who we are. There is nothing wrong with needing reassurance. There is nothing weak about wanting peace. These are signs that your soul is awake and paying attention, that you are ready to live from a place of truth. This journey is not about reaching perfection. It's about practicing presence. Louise reminded us that healing isn't a destination. It's a choice we make over and over in small moments, through gentle words and quiet courage. Healing is saying no to the voice that shames you and yes to the one that speaks with love. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to feel joy even when things aren't perfect. These aren't luxuries. They are necessities for a life lived in alignment. When you honor yourself, you teach others how to treat you. When you speak kindly to yourself, your entire nervous system responds with safety. There's a woman you might become if you keep choosing yourself. She is calm, but not passive. She is strong, but not hardened. She knows when to rest. and when to rise. She trusts herself, even when others don't understand her, and she lives with a quiet confidence that comes not from what she owns, but from who she is. That woman isn't far away. She's already within you, waiting for space to breathe. She doesn't need to be created. She needs to be remembered. Louise Hay believed that affirmations were keys that unlock doors we've forgotten we can open. So if you're looking for a place to begin, start with these words. I am safe. I am loved. I am enough. Even if you don't fully believe them yet, say them anyway. Speak them into the quiet. Let your body hear them. Let your spirit rise to meet them. You are not alone in this journey, and if anything in this message touched something inside you, even softly, know that others are walking this path too. If you feel comfortable, share a part of your journey in the comments. What thought are you choosing today that feels kinder than the one before? Your words might be the light someone else needs to feel less alone. And if this message brought you calm, clarity, or comfort in any way, feel free to subscribe and stay with us. There's so much more to explore together. You are always welcome here. You belong, and your healing matters